You were trained to believe that silence is virtue, that the quieter you are, the more respectable you become. From a young age, you were taught to keep your head down, to let your work speak for itself, and to trust that recognition would eventually find you. This idea sounds noble, it feels safe, but it is a carefully constructed lie, because in the real world, work does not speak. People do. Every time you choose to stay quiet about your achievements, you are not being honorable. You are erasing yourself. You have been conditioned to believe that shrinking your presence protects you from judgment, from envy, from conflict. But what it actually does is remove you from the game entirely. You tell yourself that you are being patient, that your moment will come, that someone, somewhere, is watching and will reward your discipline. But no one is watching, and no one is coming. This is the uncomfortable truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Your humility is not a virtue, it is a strategy of self-preservation, a shield you use to avoid the risk of being seen. Because being seen means being judged, it means being challenged, it means having to live up to the image you project. So you stay small, you soften your voice, you downplay your wins, not because you are noble, but because you are afraid. Afraid of standing out, afraid of being wrong, afraid of the responsibility that comes with visibility. But understand this, the world does not reward hidden value, it rewards declared value. And every time you pretend to be less than you are not protecting your character, you are betraying your potential. In the world of power, there is a rule no one tells you, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. If you are invisible, you are irrelevant. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are. It doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't even matter how much value you create behind the scenes. If no one can see it, measure it, or attach your name to it, then for all practical purposes, it does not exist. You think you're being strategic by staying in the background. You believe you're observing, learning, waiting for the right moment. But while you are waiting, something else is happening. The room is moving on without you. Conversations are happening, decisions are being made, positions are being filled, and your absence is being interpreted not as humility, but as insignificance. There is always someone less capable than you who is willing to step forward, someone louder, more certain, more visible. And in a system driven by perception, that person becomes the default choice, not because they are better, but because they are present. You are not competing on talent, you are competing on visibility. Every time you hesitate to speak, someone else defines the narrative. Every time you delay claiming your position, someone else occupies it. Every time you stay silent, you are casting a vote against your own relevance. And the most dangerous part is this: the longer you remain invisible, the more natural it becomes for others to ignore you. You fade into the background. You become the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who is always there, but never considered. Not for leadership, not for opportunity, not for power. Because in a world that moves fast and rewards certainty, obscurity is not neutral. It is a slow erasure. Playing small feels safe. It keeps you out of conflict. It protects you from criticism. It allows you to exist without pressure, without expectations, without the weight of being seen. But what you call safety is actually a slow and silent loss. Because every time you shrink yourself, you pay a price. You lower your voice so others can feel comfortable. You hold back ideas so you don't seem too aggressive. You downplay your achievements so no one feels threatened. And in doing so, you begin to rewrite your own identity, not as someone capable, but as someone optional. This is how it starts. You enter rooms knowing you have value, but you act as if you're lucky to be there. You wait for the right moment to speak, but that moment never comes. And when it does, someone else, less prepared, less capable, takes it without hesitation. Not because they earned it, but because they claimed it. And you watch it happen, again and again. You tell yourself it's temporary, that eventually people will notice, that consistency will be rewarded. But what you don't realize is that you are training people in real time, on how to treat you. You are teaching them that your ideas can be ignored, that your presence doesn't need to be acknowledged, that your contribution has no urgency, no weight, no cost. And over time, that becomes your role. You become the one who supports, but never leads. The one who delivers, but never decides. The one who is valued quietly, but never elevated publicly. That is the real cost of playing small. It's not just missed opportunities. It's the gradual erosion of your authority, your identity, and your place in the hierarchy. And by the time you realize it, the gap between who you are and how you're seen is already too wide to ignore. You believe reality is built on truth, on effort, on what is objectively deserved. But in the arena of power, none of that comes first. Perception does. It doesn't matter how skilled you are if people don't perceive you as skilled. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are if you communicate uncertainty. It doesn't matter how much you contribute if your presence doesn't reflect authority. Because people don't respond to your inner reality. They respond to the signals you project. And those signals are constantly being read, judged, and acted upon. If you speak with hesitation, you are perceived as unsure. If you downplay your success, you are perceived as replaceable. If you act like you are lucky to be in the room will treat you like you don't belong there. Not because it's fair, but because it's automatic. Humans are wired to simplify, to categorize, to assign status quickly. And in that process, they don't look for hidden depth. They look for visible cues, confidence, certainty, ownership. These are not just personality traits. They are signals of rank. This is why someone with half your ability can dominate a room. Not because they are better, but because they are clearer in how they present themselves. They remove doubt. They eliminate ambiguity. They make it easy for others to place them higher in the hierarchy. While you, in contrast, create confusion. You hedge your words. You dilute your statements. You soften your presence. And in doing so, you force others to guess your value, and they will almost always guess low. Because uncertainty lowers perceived worth. This is the rule most people ignore until it's too late. If you do not define your own value, the world will define it for you, and it will not be generous. You were taught that humility keeps you grounded, that it protects you from arrogance, keeps your ego in check, and makes you a better person to be around. But what you were never told is that humility, when taken too far, becomes a leash, a psychological leash. It keeps you in place. It limits how far you move, how loudly you speak, how boldly you act. And the most dangerous part is you don't even realize you're wearing it, because it was given to you as a virtue. You think you are choosing to be modest. In reality, you have been conditioned to stay manageable, easy to work with, easy to control, easy to overlook. Your humility makes other people comfortable. It allows them to feel secure in their position because you are not a threat. You don't challenge them. You don't outshine them. You don't disrupt the hierarchy. And for that, they reward you with praise. They call you humble. They call you grounded. They say they respect your attitude. But look closer. That respect rarely translates into power, influence, or opportunity. Because what they actually value is your compliance. You are predictable. You won't demand more. You won't disrupt the balance. You will do the work and stay quiet. And in a system built on competition that makes you useful but never dangerous. And in the world of power, if you are not dangerous, you are disposable. This is how the leash works. It convinces you that staying small is a moral choice, that stepping forward is arrogance, that claiming space is selfish, so you self-regulate, you hold back, you silence yourself before anyone else has to. And over time, that restraint becomes your identity. But understand this, a man who cannot assert his value is not respected for his humility, he is managed because of it. And the leash remains exactly where it was designed to be, around your potential. It doesn't happen all at once. There is no single moment where everything collapses, no dramatic fall, no clear warning. It happens slowly, decision by decision, silence by silence, until one day you realize you've disappeared from the game entirely. This is social suicide in slow motion. It begins with small compromises. You let someone else take credit for an idea because you don't want to seem difficult. You accept less than you deserve because you don't want to appear greedy. You apologize for being right because you don't want others to feel wrong. Each moment feels harmless, even virtuous. But each moment is a signal. You are teaching people how to see you. You are showing them that your work has no owner, that your value has no price, that your presence has no weight. And once that perception is established, it becomes almost impossible to reverse. People begin to speak over you, not because they disrespect you, but because you trained them to. They interrupt your ideas, overlook your contributions, and move forward without your input. And the worst part is, it feels normal, because you made it normal. You thought you were building a reputation for being easygoing, reliable, cooperative. But what you actually built was a reputation for being non-threatening, replaceable, safe to ignore. You became a utility, and utilities are not respected. They are used. Over time, the consequences deepen. Opportunities stop coming your way. Leadership roles pass you by. Your name is no longer part of important conversations, not because you lack ability, but because you erased your presence from the equation. This is the quiet tragedy. You didn't lose because you were weak. You lost because you refused to be seen as strong. In every hierarchy, there is a hidden currency more valuable than money, more influential than effort, and more permanent than skill. That currency is credit. Credit is what links your name to results. It is how people remember you, measure you, and decide whether you are worth investing in. Without it, your work becomes anonymous, and anonymous work has no power. You believe that doing the work is enough, that results will naturally point back to you. But results don't speak, they get claimed. And if you don't claim them, someone else will. There is always a person in the room who understands this. The one who speaks first. The one who summarizes the outcome. The one who says, "This is what we did," while subtly positioning themselves at the center of it. And while you hesitate, they attach their name to your effort. Not because they are more capable, but because they are more strategic. Every time you say, "It was a team effort," when you carried the weight, you dilute your ownership. Every time you step back so others can shine, you detach yourself from the result. And over time, you create a pattern where your contribution becomes invisible, even when your impact is undeniable. This is how you lose leverage, because in the eyes of the world, if your name is not tied to the outcome, you did not create it. And leverage is built on remembered victories. Promotions, opportunities, influence. They are not given to those who work the hardest. They are given to those who are associated with success, to those whose presence signals results. You are not being selfless when you give away credit. You are being strategically careless, because every unclaimed win becomes someone else's advantage. And every time you let that happen, you are not just losing recognition. You are funding another man's rise with your own effort. You call it humility. You label it as discipline, as character, as self-control. But if you strip away the language, if you look at it without the comfort of moral framing, what you find underneath is not virtue. It is fear, not fear of failure. You've already proven you can handle that. You've failed, recovered, and kept going. That's not what stops you. What stops you is the fear of being seen at your full capacity, because being seen changes the rules. The moment you step forward and say, "I did this," you create expectation. You invite scrutiny. You position yourself as someone who must now consistently perform at that level. There is no hiding after that, no retreat back into anonymity. And that pressure is what you're avoiding, so you stay humble. You downplay your intelligence, so no one expects brilliance. You soften your ambition, so no one holds you accountable to it. You speak in uncertainty, so you can always step back and say, "I never claimed to be sure." This is not modesty. This is strategic self-protection, because as long as you never fully claim your strength, you never have to fully prove it. You exist in a safe middle ground where you are capable but never tested at your highest level. And that feels comfortable, but comfort has a cost. While you are protecting yourself from judgment, you are also disqualifying yourself from power. Because power requires visibility. It requires commitment. It requires the willingness to stand behind your own name and say, without hesitation, "This is mine." And that is exactly what you avoid. You are not afraid of failing. You are afraid of succeeding in a way that removes your ability to hide. And so you choose humility, not as a virtue, but as an escape. The damage doesn't show up immediately. That's what makes it dangerous. There is no instant punishment for staying quiet. No obvious penalty for shrinking yourself in the moment. In fact, in the short term, it often feels like things are working. You avoid conflict. You stay liked. You move through rooms without friction. But beneath that surface, something is building. Every time you suppress your ambition, every time you hold back your voice, you create internal pressure. You deny expression to a part of yourself that was meant to expand, to lead, to take space. And that energy doesn't disappear. It turns inward. It becomes frustration, then resentment, then a quiet, constant anger that you can't fully explain. You start noticing patterns. People interrupt you more. They overlook your contributions. They forget to include you in decisions that you know you should be part of. And each time it happens, it reinforces a painful realization. You are not being treated as someone who matters. Not because you lack value, but because you've trained the world to see you that way. This is the hidden consequence. You don't just lose opportunities. You lose alignment with yourself. You become divided. On the outside, you are calm, agreeable, easy to work with. On the inside, you are aware of your own untapped potential, watching others, often less capable, move ahead of you. And that gap between who you are and how you're perceived begins to eat at you. It affects your energy, your confidence, your relationships, because it's hard to respect yourself when you know you're holding back. And over time, that quiet resentment doesn't stay contained. It leaks into everything. Your work feels heavier. Your interactions feel forced. Your motivation starts to fade, not because you've lost your ability, but because you've been denying it for too long. There comes a point where you can no longer pretend you don't see it. The pattern is too clear. The cost is too high. You realize that your silence has not protected you, it has erased you. And once you see that, there are only two options left. Continue disappearing or become unavoidable. The shift does not begin with volume. It begins with ownership. You stop saying, "It was nothing," when it was everything. You stop hiding behind vague language and start speaking in clear, definitive statements. Not to impress, but to establish presence. To make it known that you are not an accessory to the outcome. You are a source of it. This is where most people hesitate, because stepping into visibility feels like stepping into fire. You risk being judged. You risk being challenged. You risk standing alone. But that is the price of being taken seriously. Respect does not go to the most agreeable person in the room. It goes to the one who defines the room. So you change your posture. You take up space without apology. You speak early, not last. You attach your name to your work without diluting it. And when you are right, you don't soften it, you stand on it. Not aggressively, not arrogantly, but with certainty, because certainty is what people follow. You begin to understand that presence is not about being loud, it is about being undeniable. When you enter a space, your energy, your clarity, your conviction, they create a shift. People adjust. They listen differently. They respond differently, because you are no longer asking to be included. You are establishing that you already belong. This is the transformation from someone who waits to be recognized to someone who cannot be ignored. And once you cross that line, everything changes. Not because the world became fair, but because you finally decided to be seen.